Welcome to Bold Voices, a production of the Community Foundation of Broward, where we explore Broward's biggest issues, get to know some of the people and organizations creating a bold impact in our community, and take a deeper dive into the world of local philanthropy with the experts at the Community Foundation of Broward. And now it's time to be bold.
Welcome to Bold Voices, a podcast production of the Community Foundation of Broward, where we lead with love, and we urge you to do the same. I'm your host, Ellen Jaffe. With me today, the CEO of an organization that has literally been saving lives and keeping families safe in Broward County for 50 years now in its mission to stop domestic violence and abuse for everyone. Women in Distress is the only nationally accredited, state-certified, full-service domestic violence center serving Broward County. The organization has also been tapped to provide statewide services via the crisis hotline. It is an honor to welcome CEO Linda Parker to Bold Voices. I'm so glad to see you.
Thank you so much. I'm so glad to be here.
You're coming up on a 5-year anniversary as CEO.
5 years. It's gone very quickly.
It has, and there have been so many changes, obviously over the course of 50 years when it was
Absolutely.
a homeless shelter. But in the 5 years since you took over as CEO, can you give us a little bit of the progression?
You know, I think that one of the things that we have tried very much to do in my time here is to assess what the community needs and then respond to that. You know, I came in during the pandemic, which was quite chaotic, and there were a lot of things we had to adjust to because of the pandemic. And then that allowed us also a little bit of time to do some assessment of what was working and what we needed to improve. Ultimately, I tell folks all the time, I would love to work myself out of a job. And I know folks get tired of me saying that, but it's very true. You know, nonprofits are spun up with the idea that they fix a societal problem or they support a societal problem, and then hopefully that problem gets solved. Unfortunately, what we found over the past 5 years is that this is not going to be a solvable problem anytime soon. And in fact, we've seen about a 28% increase in domestic violence since the pandemic, and it's not going down.
You know, I remember talking to you during the pandemic, and we understood there were reasons. People were locked in together. There was a tremendous amount of stress, fear. We didn't know what was happening. There was the financial aspect. People were out of work, and so much uncertainty. But you would think that after that, it would improve. And, you know, over the years, we've talked about how domestic violence has been brought out of the shadows.
Exactly.
People talk about it now. So you would think it would be improving and people feel more comfortable talking about it and asking for help. So what do you see as the reason that it's actually gotten worse? What in our environment is it that people are watching too much TV? Does TV and the shows that we see now sort of normalize domestic violence? Is it social media? There's so much anger.
Yep, exactly.
Because I feel like there's this anonymity that people feel, even though their name is attached, but they just feel free to say the meanest things for no reason.
Exactly.
Are those components of what's happening?
I definitely think they're components. And I think what it looks like when you can go to a YouTube video and hear about how women are worthless or that men are in charge and your body, my choice kind of behavior. And then if you think about that getting ingrained in someone, I mean, kids now get access to social media at a very young age. And I imagine the impression that a kid hears when he's like, you know, you can just take control over women. Or, you know, if we went back to a place where women were kind of kept in their place or where women were not allowed to make some of these decisions.
Oh, we weren't allowed to vote. We weren't allowed to have our own credit, our own checking.
Exactly. So those same mentalities are interwoven in current social media in a lot of ways. And to be clear, I don't think that's the only reason we're seeing an upgrade. I think there's a myriad of reasons. I think psychologically, we're pretty broken. COVID really took its toll on a lot of folks, a lot of families, and some areas haven't been able to bounce back socioeconomically. That economic stress combined with a large increase in drinking and drug activity, a large increase of mental health, a large increase of, you know, not being able, the economy is not great. You used to be in the shelter, you were there for approximately 12 weeks and then we could get you back on your feet. But the average length of stay is about 4 to 6 months right now. So, you know, that causes kind of a backup situation that you have where folks can't come into the shelter because it's always full. So we're spending a large amount of money on hotels. This is the most I've ever spent at any domestic violence shelter to place people in hotels. We're spending about $18,000 to $24,000 a year to house survivors in hotels that we've worked out agreements with, because we can't turn anyone away. At the end of the day, if there's no room at the inn, then you got to find a new inn.
Right. And that certainly is $18,000 to $24,000 that could be used for something else
For housing.
if it were available. And you have more space than you used to have.
We do. Since I've been there, we've opened up more beds. So we're up to about 140 beds. And that is consistently full. In fact, this year, we have not gone down since December. Normally, there's a lull that takes place right around January, February. Families make up. You try to make it work after the holidays. And we did not see that decrease. Wow. So we have consistently had people in hotels since the end of the year. And we just try to move folks into shelter as they can. And in the meantime, we provide them services while they're at the hotel, do the same thing we would do if they were at the center, but in a very different way. And of course, that always stretches the staff then too, because then they also have to be responsible for making sure that these folks in the hotel get the services they need. So all in all, we've got a lot of good things that we've been working on over the last 5 years. But one of the gaps that we really are going to have to fill in the coming years is an expansion of the shelter.
What about funding? Have you been subject to cuts in funding?
We have seen a little bit of cuts in funding. I anticipate there were around 271 federal grants that were removed from some of the system based off of a variety of whatever factors are being used to determine that information. I do know one of the federal studies that was super important was the impact on pregnant women in domestic violence, and that one was closed. So I think what we're going to start to see is a bunch of research that is really, really instrumental to figuring out the puzzle of domestic violence being canceled, which is going to increase our need for services because there's no way of understanding. And research for domestic violence is difficult anyway, because you're dealing with a population that is very nervous, very scared, and not really prone to wanting to be a research subject.
Right.
But, there are ways that you can look into things. And I'm just very nervous about all of that research getting cut, because it's going to impact our service level. And it's going to impact the things that we need to know in order to create the best services.
Right. I mean, you have to understand what someone's going through to be able to address them properly and give them a place of comfort where they're willing to walk away from an abusive situation. You made a presentation recently for the Community Foundation of Broward, and perhaps some of it you can let our listeners know about in terms of what is it that pushes someone into that kind of relationship. And the question we hear so often is, well, why don't they just leave? And we know that it's not so simple. Can you explain that for those who are not familiar with what it's like?
So, a domestic abuse relationship is really a psychological, regardless of whether there's physical aggression or not, it's really a psychological entanglement that's similar to Stockholm Syndrome, right? So if you think about Patty Hearst and Stockholm Syndrome, and everyone was like, how could she start to, be part of her captor and, have empathy for him. Batters on their whole are never all bad all the time, right? If they were, you'd be out more quickly, right? But there's always times in and of the relationship where you see a cycle of love and support. So generally it rolls on a cycle of, I'm very unhappy with you. I do something to hurt you. But then after that, I may love bomb you, right? And so as a person, you're looking at this partner and you're saying, well, gee whiz, he does have the propensity to love me. He does have the propensity to be a good human. He may be a great father. And I say this, and I hope that everyone understands. I use the word he as just the key of the normality, but women can be batters just as much as men can be.
Right.
But that person is not ugly all the time.
They say nobody good is good all the time. Nobody bad is bad all the time. We all have our ups and our downs. Just that some of them can be more dangerous, more hurtful, more violent, unfortunately, in some cases, fatal. Is there an element of the woman, if we're just going to stick with a norm, feeling like she can fix the man? She can make him better. I think that's part of it. Yeah. But
I also think that you might think he can fix himself because he's got these small windows of opportunity where he's a good guy, right?
Right.
The other part of that is a lot of times by the time you realize that the relationship is at a level of toxicity where you're being abused, you may not have any money. You may have left your job, your support system. One of the saddest things I think we see it with is this idea that folks get so frustrated with domestic abuse survivors because they won't just leave, that by the time they get to us, there's no support system left. The family is tired of it. They don't want to deal with the victim anymore. And they're like, you should just leave. And if people really understood how psychologically ingrained batters can be in their manipulation, it would probably be a little easier to understand why they just can't leave.
So how does that work, say, on an arc of you meet someone, you start dating, and then you get involved, and little by little you become so engaged, and then you don't realize you're losing those support systems.
That's right.
And now you don't have a job. How do they do that?
Slow isolation, right? And it's usually a manipulation tactic like, I really love you and I need to know where you're at all the time because it's really a safety thing for me. I need to know. And then it escalates to, why were you here at this place? Well, I was visiting my mom. Well, from now on, I would like for you to run that by me before you go to your mom's house because I might have something planned for us. Then it becomes your job. So your job is taking too much time away from us. Or, I really think that you're not very good at managing money. So I would like for you to deposit your paychecks and then I'll just give you an allowance and I'll take care of paying all the bills because, hey, I'll take this off your plate. It'll be great, right? So by the time those things start to erode away, and at first you may think, man, this guy is great. He's trying to take care of me. He's what I've always wanted. He's
he's my prince.
Right, exactly. He's the icing on the cake. Before you know it, you can't take any of those things back, right? And then you start to push back because you realize, wait a minute, he's only giving me $20 a week and I have to take care of X, Y, and Z, but I don't know where my money's at. So then it's like, well, you can quit your job or you're not responsible enough with money. And then the aggression starts, right? Then you get the pushback of a more aggressive stance with him. I'm not telling you where the money is. I've been taking care of the money for 2 years and you don't need any more than what I'm giving you. But by that time, now you're entangled in a way that you didn't even anticipate getting into. And your friends and family may have seen some of these early signs and tried to warn you. And when you ignored them, because this is Prince Charming, right? This isn't the ugly man who's doing something to you. They lost faith in your ability to see it.
Right.
And so they're going to stop telling you things, but also they don't want to be around this man. The thought of you marrying him and having kids with him is just beyond their comprehension because they don't understand why you can't see what they can see.
Right. It's always easier to see other people's situations.
Always.
Right.
We deal with a lot of teen dating violence, which is also a very big escalating problem. And a lot of times it really is this thought of, he's not abusing me. What are you talking about? And we often have to sit down with young adults and show them, like, is this something that he does?
Right.
Well, yeah, but he only does that because of this. Is this something he does? Well, maybe, but that's not so bad, right? And by the time you get through the entire list, they're sitting there in shock like, I really am. I'm in a bad situation here, and now I've got to figure out how to get out of it. And many folks don't realize that until it's too late, or until he physically starts getting violent with you because the emotional and psychological manipulation has taken its toll, and now he can be physically assaultive.
I understand that people are staying longer even when there's violence as part of the relationship.
They are, and the violence is escalating. And I did a news piece where we were talking about what we're seeing out in the field right now. And honestly, the violence is escalating quickly. And what I tell folks is, if the violence escalates, run. Run as fast and as far as you can, because someone who would hurt you to the extent of escalating the violence is going to kill you. There is no redeeming factor. He's not going to wake up one day and say to himself, man, I really should quit hitting my spouse or partner or wife or, whoever. That's never happening. So you have to leave. Like, I can't be emphatic enough to people listening to this or their friends listen to it. You have to go.
What happens when there are children in the picture and the children are threatened?
We consider that a high lethality indicator. So there are several things that we consider a high lethality that will upgrade a domestic violence case to a potential lethal situation. One of them is threatening the children. One of them is strangulation. And strangulation is a multiplier in a relationship where domestic violence is happening because it's a very personal, very up close type of violence. And if someone is willing to choke your air off in a violent situation, they are ready to kill you. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. Additionally, choking causes traumatic brain injury, which can be long-lasting to domestic abuse survivors. We're seeing a huge increase in chronic concussions, and there's studies being done on the impact of domestic violence victims being hit amongst the head, neck, and back, and how that is leading to longer-term traumatic brain injuries, and they're not catching it until later. And then, of course, we already know that women experience in a doctor's office is very different than men's experience. And so women that are having these memory issues after they've had domestic violence are being told that they're essentially histrionics and that there's nothing wrong and it's taking too long to get them diagnosed. So that's something we've really got to work on as a group, in believing those women when they're telling you, like, I was in a domestic violence, he knocked me out. He choked me to unconsciousness. It doesn't take long to kill someone by choking them.
Isn't there also an effect where if someone is hit in the head, there's a TBI, they're not able to necessarily make good decisions anymore? It affects their ability to think well.
That's right.
And you're less likely to leave because now you can't just put the elements together.
That's exactly right.
So what I want to do is give your hotline number right now, and it's 954-761-1133. Toll free 24 hours a day. You've got experts who are handling the phone numbers. What do you tell women who call, they want to leave, and they just don't know how? They don't have money. They've got their kids. You have so much information on your website, widbroward.org, about having a go bag ready. And maybe someone's reached that point, but they just can't get out the door. They don't know how to do it.
Yep. So when you call, we want a safety plan with you, because there is a science to leaving a domestic abuse relationship. It is also the scariest and most dangerous time for a victim is when you're leaving, because it's a control dynamic that the batterer now does no longer have over you. And so sometimes when they find out you're leaving, the abuse escalates. So what we tell folks is, when you get a time that you can call us where it's safe, let's talk it through. We do the same thing with injunctions. We believe injunctions are powerful tools when they can be used appropriately, but sometimes filing an injunction escalates a situation with a batterer that will result in his behavior escalating. And so we need to know that before we go and try to serve someone with an injunction. The other thing about leaving is that it's safest to leave no matter whether you have a go bag or don't have a go bag. It's time for you to go when it's time for you to go. And only you are going to know that, because as I tell folks, if you've met one domestic abuse survivor, you've literally met one. No one's situation is the same. We can talk about cycles, and we do have things that show us that cycles are prevalent in domestic abuse relationships. But
within each one, or over the course of time?
Over the course of time, and with each one, we can kind of see generalized information of domestic violence victims. Like, this is a generalized cycle, like I spoke about a little earlier, about what you'll kind of see in a relationship. But when it's time to leave, that is a very individualized decision, and a decision that has to be taken with really precaution, including when you have children, because batterers will use what they can against the partner. And if they think that the children are a way to get at you, and they at this point don't have any right not to have access to them any more than you do, they can make that very difficult for you and a very unsafe situation. So we always advise to call. We'll talk you through it. We'll determine what your needs are. Florida is really a transient state. So a lot of times we have people down here whose support system is in Minnesota, right? We've sent people to Hawaii. We've sent people back to the UK. And we have a great partnership with Spirit that gives us pretty much unlimited vouchers. So, the bottom line is, I want you to be where your people are. So sometimes it's bringing you into shelter and then immediately flying you out of here and getting you to a safe location. Sometimes it's we get you in the shelter and we get you shored up and figure out what it is, and we assess there for what your needs are going to be. Maybe you don't need shelter and you just need our outreach center with the same programs, right? Just minus the residential setting. We're really looking, as WID has been here for 50 years, we're really looking at doing housing. So we'll have survivors in housing in the community that we will be able to help them for a longer period of time, give them a little more ramp up period, because, the old school method of domestic violence emergency shelter was 90 days or 6 weeks. That's not enough time for someone to wrap their mind around the fact that they're even in this place. Right. It takes folks 2 weeks of trauma just to pick their head up and look around and say, okay, now I think I'm ready to talk about what my next steps are. Then you've got to figure out, where am I going to live? How is my income going to be? What kinds of things do I have to worry about? If I have children, what do I have to worry about with this other person? And where do the laws lie? I need an attorney. I need all of that can't be done really in 6 weeks.
Oh my God, it's so much. But your services keep expanding.
They do.
For children, for pets, and, now the children's services have expanded. What are some of these services that you can offer both in the shelter and to people who are either in a home or in a hotel?
So we have the Enrichment Center, which now has expanded hours twice. So we're moving into weekend hours and increasing the number of children that can be seen there. So it's essentially like a daycare center. What we're trying to do is build it up to be a therapeutic school so that kids can go to school there if they need to. We do have a hybrid situation where we have tutors that come in from the Broward County schools and help kids with homework, or if we've got kids that are homeschooled, help them, and they're able to do that there. We have a lot of therapy services for kiddos, a lot of play therapy, adventure therapy. We just really understand that we start assessing for kids the effects of domestic violence when they're an infant, because we know that domestic abuse that happens when someone is in utero has an impact on their development right away. So the effects of domestic violence raises mom's stress, it raises her cortisol levels, that gets transmitted to the baby. Babies can come out and they have, and trauma is shown in different ways, fussiness, attachment issues, right? That's the other thing. If mom and the two parents are fighting a lot and the child can't attach appropriately, then that causes issues later on down the line in development. So we start assessing right away for those services, and then we try to adapt everything according to what the needs of the child are.
What was the reaction when you made the presentation here at the Community Foundation of Broward and talked about these things and the prevalence and how domestic violence, Broward has been one of the top counties in the country for domestic violence, and to hear that it's increasing is distressing.
It is. It's exceedingly traumatizing.
What was the reaction from people here who are working daily to fix so many things, so many issues?
I think there was a little bit of shock. I don't think that everyone understood the depth of the situation. Just within the last 90 days, we've had, at least that I can think of, 4 major deaths resulting in multiple family members killed as a result of domestic violence. And it's to a point now where we need to talk about it, right? We need to talk about it. And I think the response was shock and fear, because some of the cases that we're seeing, there was no physical violence until it was the end. And it was more of a coercive control kind of thing. There was a lot of control dynamics, a lot of oppression, but there wasn't a lot of signs. And at least one of those cases that the domestic abuse was well known. So, those are things you have to be mindful of. I also think when I spoke to everybody, I was pretty open about we're doing everything that we can do to be innovative to truly fix the issue. Like, one of the things that we're rolling out with Lauderhill is a pilot program that we're affectionately calling MARS, which is a mobile advocacy response system. So we are going to be boots on the ground with the police department at the DV scene.
That's great.
Once the scene is safe, we won't ever put the staff in a situation where they're in an unsafe location. So if the batter has not been found and he flees, then we won't dispatch out. But what we are hoping to do is meet with the survivor immediately. Lauderhill PD was chosen because they collect a lot of good data and they have the highest domestic violence rates in the county. So luckily we got a private donor that was willing to allow us to do this pilot program for a year. We're going to collect the data. What we're trying to do is build a case as much as we can right away so that the survivor, we get all the evidence that we can. The police take the police report, they hand it off to the state attorneys, and we can build a solid case so that the survivor's voice is not the only thing that has to carry the case. Now, will that always work? Not always, but I can tell you that this method has been used in the UK and it has been shown to decrease the amount of times that survivors go back to the abuser because there's someone right there right away saying, what do you need? Where can we take you? We're there to work with child welfare right away on the case. We can get with them right away and say, look, these are what we are seeing. We have staff co-located with the Department of Children and Families inside those offices anyway, so we can immediately start working with them. If it's a high lethality case, we can get our high lethality team on it, and then we'll work directly with the police department to work the case through until it gets to court and that gets adjudicated.
What can people do to help you do your job better? If you had a wish list or,
oh my goodness,
new programs that you want to implement.
So the MARS program is going to be a pilot. I would love to expand that out because it's going to be limited hours. I would like to have support for the capital campaign because it's going to put people in safe housing for a long time in Broward County, and it's going to allow us to open up shelter beds more quickly. We always need help and support in volunteers, and we always need help in funding housing and just day-to-day needs. You know, if you think about going to the doctor, been punched in the face, and now you have to get teeth replaced. Who's paying for that?
Right.
That comes from funding that we have to fundraise. You know, he took a baseball bat to your car and your windows need to be replaced, and you only have liability insurance because that's all you could afford. Now we've got to replace windows, you know, at whatever cost that is. Maybe you need new clothes because you had to leave with nothing. And in most of these cases, we're talking about starting an entire household over. So think about what you would have to do in order to get everything in your household, from kitchen to bathroom to bedroom to living room. And then if you have kids, right?
Enormous amounts of money, time, energy, things that we don't all have.
That's right.
So yeah, it's tremendous. How is the Community Foundation of Broward able to support what you do, in addition to listening?
Yeah. So I will say that the Community Foundation, we both have a grant with them. That's all it does is help participants get to their next step. Okay. It's a beautiful grant. It was one of the first grants that we got from the Community Foundation outside of we do have accounts here with the Community Foundation. We've been, I think, one of the first nonprofits that ever had money here at the Community Foundation. And so we get money from that every year, which helps support our mission. And also it's unrestricted dollars, right? Which is something that all nonprofits need all the time.
Right. It is important that you can use it for how you need it. I would like to do a little bit of myth busting.
Okay.
I believe that there is a stereotype that people have for who's a victim. The stereotype may be someone who is low income, not very intelligent, grew up in a poor family, doesn't have aspirations. And I know I've spoken to attorneys, congresswomen. So
yes.
Tell us about the range.
So there's no one person. I was a domestic violence victim. So it's like any other type of stereotype. We had the speaker from Starfish 2 years ago.
And I'll clarify, the Starfish event is your annual, it's a huge fundraiser. It was a luncheon, but this year for 50 years you did big gala where you honor people who've made a difference in the community in supporting, trying to end domestic violence and support those survivors.
Yes. And this year we did honor the Community Foundation. I will say that I don't think that anyone kind of understands how much every dollar really helps support. And we're a lean organization, so 88 cents of every dollar goes to participants. To do that, we have to be able to have community support. And there is nothing like community support in Broward County. I've never seen anything like it.
Yeah.
Even us as nonprofits, when we all share funders, there's just no way around it. But it never feels to me like it's this, blood in the water. It's all very supportive of each other. And so I appreciate that about Broward.
Collaborative is the word that I've heard used so often, and it just warms my heart. So what I would say to our listeners is you can donate directly at widbroward.org, widbroward.org for women in distress. And I recommend going there anyway, because there is just so much useful information for whatever situation you might be in, or just for your own personal knowledge. There's a thrift shop that you can make donations to.
Exactly.
I have a lot of clothes for you, by the way.
If I had $1 every time.
When someone has left with nothing, they need clothes to go on an interview for a job.
Exactly. And our survivors get to shop there for free. Yep. So know that when you're donating there, you're donating directly to survivors anyway, because they go there twice a week and get clothes. And, when they're ready to leave and they get their first house, they can go there and get stuff from the... Right. So we love our thrift store.
And information about the thrift store is also at widbroward.org. And also go to the Community Foundation's website, cfbroward.org. It is possible you would want to make a donation to one of the dedicated funds, or perhaps start your own fund where you can choose from so many different areas. But if survival of a human being, a child, a pet, is something that is important to you, you will know that your money is being well spent with women in distress. Just a remarkable organization. So that's what we work toward at the Community Foundation of Broward. Obviously, you do that every day at Women in Distress. And again, I encourage our listeners to be part of Leading with Love. Please visit Women in Distress. You can read Linda's own message, Linda Parker, CEO of Women in Distress, at widbroward.org, and the 24-hour emergency line, 954-761-1133. And of course, Community Foundation of Broward, cfbroward.org. Thank you on behalf of all of the survivors for what you do.
You're so welcome. Thank you for having me.
As always, except for last month when we had another Kirk on with us on Bold Voices, we are so happy to welcome Kirk Engelhardt, Vice President of Marketing and Communications at the Community Foundation of Broward. It's Kirk's Corner. Welcome back.
Thank you, Ellen. It's so good to be here, always. You do such a great job with this show and with every interview. You just pull out incredible stories and make us think about and learn about what's really going on in this community, and I can't thank you enough.
Well, thank you. That was completely unexpected. And the people that you present, their stories are incredible to share. It was sobering hearing that after all these years of bringing domestic violence out of the shadows, and you think that as that happens, it will reduce the numbers. If anything, they've increased, starting with COVID, and it's continued to get worse.
Yeah, and I think if you talk to any person, they probably know somebody or know of somebody who has been in an abusive situation and could certainly use the services and the help of an organization like Women in Distress. And we only have one Women in Distress. The computer system that I have here in front of me only goes back to 1997, and I know we've been granting to them prior to 1997. But if I look back into our system here and crunch the numbers, it looks like since 1997, the Community Foundation and the fund holders here have granted almost $5 million to women in distress. And their mission is critical. Every dollar they get is mission critical. And this is an organization that is serious about what they do. And they're so serious, they have established their own endowment, and they've done it here through the Community Foundation of Broward. And we have a number of nonprofits that work with us to establish their own endowments here, which provides permanent, sustainable support for their charitable missions. These are organizations that want to not only show their donors that they're serious about being there for the long term, but they are serious about it because they're setting up endowments, and endowment dollars last forever. And it's a permanent, sustainable source of revenue for them. What we do here at the foundation is we shepherd and we grow those funds through careful investment. So we invest the dollars, they grow, and it means more money for the nonprofit forever. It's a line item in their budget. They can count on that distribution every year. And Women in Distress, in fact, is one of our nonprofit community builders, and there are 8 of those. And those are organizations that have endowments here at the foundation of more than $1 million.
Wow.
And that's really incredible. And that's a distribution that goes back to them from that fund, what's made off of the investment on that fund every single year to support the mission. And like I said, it's mission critical. Every dollar is for women in distress.
It must take a particular mindset for a nonprofit to become a community builder, to place an endowment with you. I would guess that people who use their services are thinking, but we need that money here now. How can we look ahead? How can we put that money aside?
Yeah, there's a couple of reasons a nonprofit would do that. One, it protects the dollars. So let's say a nonprofit organization is holding property and they sell the property and they get an influx of a couple $1 million. Well, that money could be spent down immediately and they would never see those dollars again. They could put that money in an endowment and they will have the benefit of those dollars in perpetuity, forever, for eternity. As long as the organization is there, as long as we're here, and we're here for the long term, those dollars will be available to support the mission. It also sends a real message to the donors of an organization that this nonprofit is rock solid. This nonprofit is thinking ahead. They're thinking about the future. They've got their own safety net in place to provide dollars if there's ever a shortfall, if there's ever an additional need. They've got the dollars in place to help. And it's just one way to show that you're strong, you're stable, you're serious, and you're going to be here for the long term.
Those are all things that survivors of domestic violence need, because when they are finally able to leave an abusive relationship, they're at a point where they have lost all of the security in their lives. A lot of them have lost the contacts, the people who are there to support them. They've lost their independence, And often they've lost the confidence to regain that independence. And Women in Distress builds them back up, just like you build a home. They are amazing contributors to our community. And I love talking to Linda Parker, the CEO of Women in Distress of Broward County.
Yeah, so I appreciate her coming on. I think this is going to be an eye-opener for many people out in our community who are listening today. And if there are other nonprofit organizations that want to follow in their footsteps and talk about establishing an endowment here at the foundation, we are ready and willing and would love to help you.
And you can find out more at cfbroward.org. And of course, you can always learn about Women in Distress of Broward County at their website, widbroward, W-I-D Broward.org. Or, again, you'll find them on the Community Foundation of Broward website, cfbroward.org. Kirk Engelhardt, Vice President of Marketing and Communications and font of all knowledge, thank you for being with us. We'll talk to you in our next episode of Bold Voices. And remember to lead with love.
Thank you for listening to Bold Voices. We hope you've enjoyed this episode and hope you'll be inspired to join us in creating a better Broward for all. If you'd like more information, visit us online at cfbroward.org and remember to always be bold.